And it is time once again for another AEW Dynamite review here on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Hello, welcome. I am Warren. It is my pleasure to welcome you into the review environment, the Dynamite review environment. And we are specifically going to be reviewing the June 25 edition, 2025, of course, of Dynamite, which happened in Kent, the state of Washington. I don't think I've ever heard of the city of Kent, or is it town? The Fellowship of Kent? I've never heard of it. And I absolutely have never heard of the Accesso Showwear Center. Never heard of the Accesso Showwear Center. Not exactly one of your great hubs for professional wrestling. Not one of the not one of the beating hearts of the business, right? As far as venues go. You know, I don't think anyone speaks about the Accesso Showwear Center on the same with the same reverence as Corcoran Hall, or Arena Mexico or ECW Arena. No, I don't think so. But it turns out the Accesso Showwear Arena is it's a 6,500 seat venue that AEW managed to get 2,370 tickets distributed for. It's an interesting setup. Look, I don't know how many tickets you have to eliminate for technical needs, for the stage, for the live broadcast, but we are clearly under the year-to-date average, which has gone up substantially. All of this, of course, all of these numbers are provided to us via WrestleTix. 3,362 is the year-to-date attendance average for Dynamite, and we're like 1,000 tickets beneath that, so it's a substantial drop. That being said, like I said, it's a 6,500 seat arena. I don't know how many tickets had to be compromised. I don't know if they could have sold more. Well, they could have sold more because their setup, they were very close to their setup, which was for 2,658 tickets. There was like just under 300 tickets left available according to the setup. And this is not the final count either, right? Let's always keep that in mind. This is from WrestleTix before the show yesterday, because we're recording this on the Thursday. So we could, there could be a few more added, but ultimately, I don't think this, not only do I not think, this is one of their worst performing venues that they've been in over the past few weeks. It is clearly under their year-to-date average as far as attendance goes. But maybe this was where they maxed out too. But I don't think they'd run a venue. Look, I'm trying to say too many things at once, but I don't think it makes sense to run a venue where, because of your production needs, you'd have to kill off like 3,000 tickets. That doesn't make sense. That makes no sense at all. Like a venue this size is what I mean. It makes no sense. So I can only assume that it just didn't do well in Kent, Washington. I don't know why they didn't go to Portland. Well, they've been to Portland recently, right? Yeah, they were in Portland just like two weeks ago. So did we burn out the territory a little bit here? I don't know how far Kent is from Portland. Should we have run Spokane? Is Spokane a bigger town? Like, these are just names I know that I just throw around. It's just names. I know. It's when someone shows you when you see a music poster festival, a music festival postal. When you see, it's going to be a long one, folks. When you see a music festival poster and you start looking at the names, you see a bunch of names on there, where you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of, Dan Goldblum and the Backroom Sniffers. I've heard of that band, but I know of them because I've seen the name being thrown around, but I've never listened to a full recording, a full LP of Dan Goldblum and the Backroom Sniffers. I have no idea if they are good or not. I have never consumed and listened and properly given any attention to an album, or even not even just an album, not a whole album, even like just a track. I've never even heard a single track from Dan Goldblum and the Backroom Sniffers. But nonetheless, I've heard of the band. I'm not saying that there is a band that actually is named Dan Goldblum and the Backroom Sniffers. If so, buy their merch again, because this is just a pure coincidence. This is like something I sort of made up here because I didn't want to use a real band as an example, so as to not offend the band or offend the band's fans, which is probably worse. If you offend the band's fans, it generally, if you do something or you say something that offends the fans of a band, it usually doesn't turn out well for you as the critiquer, as the person who made the joke, as the person who said the thing. They'll come after you, and then it becomes a worse situation, becomes a worse thing. Where I'm pretty confident I can talk as much shit as I want about Dan Goldblum and the Backroom Sniffers. I'm pretty sure. Even if the band does exist, even if it did, I don't think they have any fans. Not any rabid fans. I don't think they have any stands. I've never I would have seen them operate at this point. I think it's completely safe. That'll probably be our go-to moving forward when trying to mock music in a certain way or trying to critique music. We'll talk about old Dan Goldblum, and maybe he's at other projects. We'll have to find out. We'll have to find out moving forward if Dan Goldblum expanded into other projects outside of the Backroom Sniffers. Maybe he had a solo career. Maybe he had another band. Maybe he had other projects. Maybe he was in a supergroup at some point. Stick around, subscribe to the channel, and maybe we'll find out eventually. So back to Dynamite. This show here was I enjoyed the show. It was a good little show. We're coming off of 3 weeks of really big time shows that got me excited, that helped raise the little hairs in the back of my neck, because I was so into it, and I was expecting nothing less from this week. I don't think it was a reasonable thing to. I don't think it would have been reasonable for anyone to expect Dynamite this week to reach the highs that it did last week, or the past couple of weeks. Those were extremely good shows. The 4-hour shows, of course, we're talking about the Fyter Fest, Summer Blockbuster, and then Grand Slam Mexico. You'd be hard pressed to find, better overall shows than those three right there. Not that this show was bad. Au contraire, I thought this was a good show, but it didn't rise to the heights. And why would it? It's fine. It's a good show. Overall, that continued to advance stories and angles for All In. I thought we were going to get this week. I thought we were going to get 1 or 2 extra announcements for All In, and we didn't. And in fact, and we'll get to it in a bit. There's even one match I thought that. There was one match I thought they were going to give us, but clearly we're going into another direction. So again, we'll talk about all of that when we get there. But, solid wrestling overall. If not, nothing that'll make you Well, there was one match that I thought was really, really terrific, but there's nothing overall that is going that on the show that would make you like that you're going to add to your match of the year list or anything like that. But overall, a good show, and I thought successful in its execution. Why don't we start talking about it? Opening up the show with Mercedes Moné, who blindsided Toni Storm as Toni Storm was arriving backstage. Isn't this the second time she does this? It's the second time Mercedes does it, right? To Toni in this, and wasn't there? There was another instance where Toni was arriving at the building and Mercedes blindsided her, right? Or am I dreaming? Did I dream that? No, I think it did happen just a few weeks ago, right? And Mercedes drags her out into the venue, out on the stage, and she steals a microphone from a crew member, shoves the crew member down, basically says, oh, you want to play games? And she says, I'll make you look like a stupid bitch. Okay. I'm not quite sure what the connection is with games, but it's fine. It's fine. Moné locks her into the statement maker, and eventually Mina Shirakawa, all the refs are trying to keep them apart, and eventually Mina Shirakawa runs in to sort of save the day. And from that point on, I'm like, okay, so we're going to get Mercedes Moné taking on, Toni Storm's best friend kind of thing in the lead up. And I think moving forward, and I think that's a good idea. You can have some really interesting angles with that. Some good way for the heel to get some heat as well. And they already set it up for the big Dynamite 300 show, which is happening next week. So it was on the Dynamite, right? Yeah, it was on Dynamite, or are they doing it on Collision? No, they do it on Dynamite because the TBS title is also going to be on the line. Interesting that they do that, but it doesn't really, like, she's not losing. It's still the same situation. It's like, I've already seen like folks on Blue Sky speculating. It's like, well, what if Mina wins the TBS title and then and then that's a sign that Mercedes is going to win at All In. And I'm like, sure, but that's not happening. Like, there is a 0% chance that is happening. Look, I am not a betting man. I say this more than often, but if I did, and this is not actual financial advice that I'm giving you. This is just for entertainment purposes only. Again, I'm not a betting man, but I would put $0 on Mina Shirakawa defeating Mercedes Moné. It's just not happening. They're not blowing they're not blowing the big story of Mercedes Moné never getting pinned by anyone in AEW on a throwaway match to the lead up to the big match, like 2 weeks out to the real big match. They're not doing that. It doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Again, sense, zero. Sense equals zero. It doesn't make any sense. So we got that set up off of this little angle. And then that leads us to Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay defeating Blake Christian and Lee Johnson in a fine, fun little match. Points of note here: the match before the match starts, the Young Bucks show up and they say, "Hey," they show up on the Tonytron and they say, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna throw our weight around, and you thought your match was happening later tonight? No, it's happening right now. Hit Ospreay's music." And immediately Ospreay's music hits. Now, I appreciate this very much because how this was handled. Because Will Ospreay wasn't ready to go. Like, there's no way he was ready to go. If he was told, yeah, your match is going to be later on in the evening, it's going to be, I don't know, in quarter hour 6 or whatever the fuck, he was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not starting to stretch just yet. I'm not, but because of that, hit the music, and he's not ready to go. So he doesn't come out. He's not waiting in Gorilla to come out. In kayfabe, of course, because we know he's actually there. But in kayfabe, he's still in the back, and he hears this shit going on. Or maybe someone comes and raps on his door and says, Will, it's time for your match. And Will is like, what the fuck? I'm not stretched. I'm still in my, and he grabs his gear and he starts putting on his pads and his shoes, and they're all untied, and he starts taping himself up. And he doesn't even have time to put on the robe. The robe is probably still in the suitcase. He didn't pull it out yet. There's no time for the robe. So there's a significant amount of time that passes. And that's very bold. There's a significant amount of time that passes. And then Ospreay comes out and he's taping himself up. He comes to the ring and he does a couple of, he comes out in time for his big poses for the audience, right? And he hits the ring and he ties up his shin pads and his shoes, and it's fine. He's good to go. And then so it's the same thing with Swerve, but with Swerve they didn't have to wait as long because Swerve clearly already made it to Gorilla because he was made aware at the same time Ospreay was. But he comes out and he's putting on his t-shirt. He's like, oh, well, I'm hawking my wares, wearing my merch. So he comes out and he's putting on his t-shirt. Otherwise, he's pretty much ready, but he does look annoyed. He's kind of like, these motherfuckers kind of thing. And then and I appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. A little attention to detail, but it's these kind of things, again, that help make AEW feel different than WWE, because the WWE, you do not fuck with the entrances, because that's what people are there for. So you don't screw with the entrances. The entrances are sacrosanct. There's, so doing something like this, and besides, we've seen it multiple times in WWE, right? It's like, your match starts now. Ugh. And then they go to the ring, and whatnot. They're already there. But then, of course, in WWE, everyone walks around in their gear. So, it's an entirely different concept. But the point being is that they wouldn't fuck around with an entrance like this. They wouldn't have Seth Rollins. I think he's changed though, right? But they wouldn't have Seth Rollins, take his time coming out to get people to sing, or Yeet Man. They wouldn't have people wait to yeet for fear that they would not yeet once Yeet Man comes out. You know what I'm saying? Like that, yeah. But yeah, look, this is the match itself was, like I said, was fine. Swerve and Ospreay were in control. Corkscrew moonsault and the putting all sorts of great moves together. The Young Bucks actually come out during the match and with their music, and that does the distraction thing, which is kind of lame. But it distracts the baby faces enough for the heels to get in control. Blake Christian looks really good after when he comes back from commercial. He does a 450 splash. He does his dive, but it all comes crashing down when Ospreay hits the hidden blade, and that allows Swerve to hit his house call for the win. They did a couple of other moves, like double team moves as well. They do the thing where the brain buster, the kick to the face brain buster thing, and all of that. So it's a fine little match. Got people excited. Extended the tail here, and after the match, the Swerve gets on the microphone and challenges the Bucks to a match at All In because he's fed up of everything. And Ospreay says, hey, you know what? We're kind of tired of you guys throwing your weight around and being bullies and whatnot. So why don't you put your EVP titles on the line? And the Bucks are like, whoa. I love Nick Jackson here, because most of his responses, the majority of his responses, which are terrific, is him just like doing one of these, winding up to do the point, doing these, going, you shut your mouth. You shut your mouth. That's pretty much all he could muster, which was terrific. So essentially that, and I was expecting the graphic to show up. I was expecting Tony Khan is just announced official for All In. But no, he didn't. They didn't do the graphic, which leads me to believe that the Bucks still have to throw in a stipulation. Like they're not going to risk something if these guys don't risk something back, which makes sense. I think that's why the graphic, I think that's why the match wasn't made official. I mean, we're getting it, right? I think it's all but confirmed at this point, but that's what's happening. In fact, speaking of the Bucks, they were backstage saying that Swerve was going to be suspended for a week because he touched an AEW official because he did the Swerve, the double stomp off the top rope onto everyone on the floor, which was very, very well shot by AEW production on that one. And basically because he did that, well, they have grounds to suspend him for a week. And then Okada shows up with RPG Vice and Konosuke Takeshita. And they're all in collusion. They're all in cahoots here just to make life miserable for Kenny Omega as much as possible. And they're going to do that by going through Kota Ibushi, who will be wrestling shortly. Kota Ibushi, of course, being Kenny Omega's best friend and golden lover. And Trent promises to hurt Kota Ibushi and make Okada proud. So there you go. That leads us to the match itself. Kota Ibushi defeating Trent Beretta. I thought this was pretty good. I think they picked a really smart opponent for Kota, a guy who could work the Japanese style, and that's what Kota needed to do here. He needed to be able to work a style very familiar to him. Couldn't go too out there with it, He just give him a comfort zone where we could do like some fighting spirit and stuff like that. And I thought for what it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. And on top of that, look, I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it maybe a little more than the match itself was worth, because it was with Garrett Kidney in one of our group chats. He put it rather perfectly, and I'll paraphrase him here. The good thing about this match was we were able to watch Kota Ibushi wrestle without feeling depressed, because Ibushi's post-injury return to pro wrestling, post New Japan and all of that, has not been great. It's actually been a little sad. He looking out of shape, looking confused, not knowing what the hell he's doing. He really hasn't been looking great. Am I sitting here telling you that, this was a 5-star affair? Far from it. Not even close. Not a 4-star affair. Nothing great. But at the very least, I wasn't watching this match saying to myself, oh, here is the shadow that we once knew as Kota Ibushi. He looked good. The last times we saw him, he, quite frankly, looked a little out of shape, especially for a guy whose body was part of his thing. Like it was part of his presentation specifically. A man chiseled out of granite. He was like a fucking Greek statue, right? He's older now, injuries, so on and so forth. He doesn't look like he looked like 5 years ago, of course. He doesn't look like that anymore. But now at the very least, he looked in shape. He looked ready for what was going on. And he wrestled well. And that's all I could ask for this re-debut, is for him to not make me wish that he was just retired, which was how I was feeling the last few times I saw him, particularly in the Blood and Guts match last year. I was like, just we're fine, Kota. At this point, let the memories live on, and we'll hang on to the past. Who cares about the future? Now it's more like, okay, well, there might be something here. Now, what is the Kota Ibushi ceiling back to being what it was? Main eventer, top guy. I don't think so. We'll get a good glimpse into that next week when he fights Kazuchika Okada for the Continental title. But I right now, I don't see that Kota Ibushi. I think that guy he's moved on. I think he's going to exist in another era, and that's okay. And that's okay. If he can still come on board and have some high-level matches when it's time, then yes, let's get excited about it. Let's pump our fists. Let's jump up and down. This crowd was really into having Kota Ibushi and wrestle. They understood. They were into it, and they were doubly excited to see him and Kazuchika Okada going nose to nose as well. So there's all sorts of good things here. So yeah, Trent does a Busaiku knee and does the Gotch pile driver as well. Ibushi kicks out of that. He strikes back with some palm strikes. He does some half and half suplexes, dragon suplex, and the Kamigoye for the win. I have no issues with this match. I thought it was as good a return as you could expect from a Kota Ibushi who had just left everyone shrugging and going, what happened? This was very encouraging. At the very least, it was very encouraging. I forgot to mention just a quick note in the previous segment, right, where Kazuchika Okada is there with Don Callis, not with the Don Callis family. Don Callis was not there, at least not on camera, and he was there with Konosuke Takeshita, as we mentioned. And I forgot to mention this, that as everyone sort of dissipated at the end of the segment with the Bucks, Okada and Takeshita remained in frame, and Takeshita stood up to him and said, basically sort of challenged him and said, hey, I'll be around, I'll be keeping an eye on you or whatever, ready to challenge you. And, wouldn't want to say Okada blew him off, but Okada kind of blew him off in the most Okada way possible. So I think this is the second time they tease Okada and Takeshita, and I hope they follow through on this one. Look, with the way AEW does its stories now, I think that just the fact that they mentioned it means that they have something up their sleeve. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. Does this mean that Takeshita will no longer be a part of the Don Callis family? Or is it just going to be one of these instances where there's just like some friendly intra-unit competition? Your guess is as good as mine at this point. We get a good Jon Moxley promo. A very good Jon Moxley promo. Kind of make, the ones that remind you that Jon Moxley is a terrific promo. And I thought it was really good. It was very intense, very sincere. Again, challenging Hangman to become the man that he says he's going to be, doing the, shucks, it couldn't be me kind of thing. I'm not that special. I like that. It's a valid criticism that a lot of people have regarding Hangman. Myself, I don't have an issue with Hangman being questioning himself, being anxiety ridden. I don't have an issue with that. I just want Hangman to evolve as a character because he's basically been doing this and variants of since the beginning. Now I understand that this is the principal tenet of his character, but there's ways we can also move on, right? And I think the self-doubt after a while is the self-doubt after winning a world championship, for instance, is going to wear thin really fucking fast. So I'm hoping that there is some character evolution, progression for the Hangman throughout all of this. Anyway, that's what's Jon Moxley is calling for here. Basically says Hangman is full of emo crap and excuses, and gets us a little more hyped up for the main event of All In, or at least the presumed main event. I'm just gonna reiterate this. I think I mentioned this once, but I'm gonna bring it up again. We are deep in the debate as to what should main event All In, the women's title or the men's title. And all I'm going to say is this. If Hangman goes on second, if Hangman Mox goes on second, Hangman is losing. Okay? I want you all to keep that in mind. Because they are going to finish this show with the highest of highs. No disrespect to Toni Storm, but the Hangman winning the AEW World Championship is a bigger deal and is another long-standing story coming to a culmination. It is a much bigger deal for fans than Toni Storm winning the title. Because if they are not ending the show with the heel winning, a championship. They're not. They're not ending the show with Mox winning. They're not ending the show with Mercedes winning. So I promise you, if Hangman Mox goes on second, they're doing it because Mox is winning and Hangman Adam Page is losing. If they go on last, you can feel secure that Hangman's winning. So it's whatever you prefer at this point. It's whatever you want. And no, they're not going to do big back-to-back babyface wins. They're not going to have Hangman win. Let's say, because I'm already hearing the arguments. Warren, here's what they could do. They could have both Tony win in the main event and Hangman win his match before as well. And the answer here is no, because it's going to take away from Tony winning, the special moment of Tony winning. If you have Hangman win, which is going to generate a huge pop from the crowd, it's going to take away from Tony winning. The crowd is not going to be as energetic and into it because they're going to have a big resolution, positive resolution, a crowd-friendly resolution for this big angle, and they're going to be super satisfied. And they're going to be happy if Tony retains, don't get me wrong, but it won't be the reaction you think she's going to get. Right? That's why whoever goes on second has a very good chance that the heel is going to win. And I apply the same logic. If Mercedes versus Tony goes on second, there's a very good chance Monet is going to win. Or they might not even put it second. But you understand my point, right? I'm pretty sure you understand my point because you're a very smart audience. I'm pretty sure you get where I'm coming from. So ultimately, it's whatever you want to see at the end of the day. Do you want to see the women main event, which is completely legitimate? If you want to see that, that's fine. Do you want to see Hangman win? That's fine. Well, Hangman has to be in the main event. Hangman will win if he is in the main event. Anyway, let's move on. Jet Speed defeated AR Fox and Ricochet before the match. Ricochet rolled up to AR Fox to recruit him in as a minion, I guess. And AR Fox, they're starting to build up the fact that you're building momentum, so on and so forth. And clearly, whatever issues had existed between AEW or TK, whoever, and AR Fox, I feel like a lot of things have been cleared up because AR Fox is back on TV a lot. Yes, he's losing, but he seems to be, he's getting a lot of TV time, and he seems to be in a vibe right now where he's rebuilding trust with the audience. Everyone loves AR Fox. He's one of these guys that always gets a great reaction and puts on great performances, does some really creative stuff, just like he did in this match. And Tony has this booking pattern where he has a guy lose a bunch of matches and then decides to push him maybe that's the direction we're going with AR Fox, but there's clear, because, not just because there are indications that they're telling this story, because that was the lead in from Renee Paquette, who was interviewing him. It was like, you seem to be gathering momentum, And then Ricochet arrives before he really conducts his interview, and he says, let's pair up against the Jet Speed, which they do. And Fox is basically working his ass off in this match. He nails the big offense, and Ricochet even, he's not super interested in tagging in. He wants to see what this guy can do, and so on and so forth. Jet Speed gets some offense in. But then later in the match, Ricochet just walks out of the match. He's done, wipes his hands of it, which allows Jet Speed to get back in control. Kevin Knight lands the UFO splash for the big win. So AR Fox dejected again. Ricochet's like, this isn't my guy. I'm gonna tell you, for a little mid-card storyline, I'm intrigued. I don't know where this is going. I have no idea where this is going. It could go a bunch of ways. Is Ricochet actually going to have guys be on his side? Is AR Fox the guy who's going to show up and try to teach him a lesson? We'll see how things go. We'll see how things go on that level. But more importantly, after this match, the Hurt Syndicate show up, all of them, and they attack Jet Speed, Bobby Lashley, in fact, and Shelton Benjamin. They set Kevin Knight, if I'm not mistaken, on a table. They get a table at the top of the ramp, and they lay Kevin Knight on top of it, and Lashley choke slams. I think it's a choke slam. Or he body slams Speedball onto Kevin Knight, and there you go. So that sets this up here, I think, clearly for All In, which I think is a match that the crowd is going to be into. We'll take the time to do a preview very shortly for the upcoming All In show. But if you ask me, my only concern is whether or not the Hurt Syndicate can have, for once, not the worst match on pay-per-view. That's all. That's basically what I'm wondering. And I'm figuring with a guy like Mike Bailey, a guy like Kevin Knight, you would assume that we should be able to get a great match out of it. But hey, or just even a good match, right? A really good match. Not necessarily. My expectation is not great for the Hurt Syndicate, but good, I think, is fair. So that leads us to a promo by MVP and the Hurt Syndicate. They get into the ring. MVP basically taunts Jet Speed and says basically, hey, if you guys can walk after that beating we just gave you, we'll gladly give you a shot at our titles at All In if you can, which is pretty cool. This is what I'm hoping, though. I'm hoping that the Hurt Syndicate can have a match which will not be the worst match of the pay-per-view. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm thinking that with a guy like Mike Bailey, with a guy like Kevin Knight, it will not, but that's my expectation for the next Hurt Business match, essentially. So clearly that's where we're going. I guess there's still a possibility that this match turns into a multi-team situation, like a 4-way tag team, and I hope it doesn't. I hope it's just like one-on-one, and that the Hurt Business can really get a really, really good match, instead of just being the one where you're like, because that's consistent. They consistently have had the worst matches on the pay-per-views. They haven't been disasters for the most part. They haven't been like absolute stinkers, but they haven't been the best either. Now, this also brings out Mark Briscoe, because he's coming out. Oh, well, before that, sorry, excuse me. So then MJF then grabs the microphone, and I'm like sitting there and I'm going, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. He's going to talk about Mystico, and he's going to talk about stealing his mask, and we're going to set up the hair versus mask match. This is what I was waiting for. And yes, he does talk about Mystico and unmasking him in Arena Mexico. But that's it. Then what he does is he announces that he is going to enter himself into next week's eliminator match, or qualifier match, I should say, to get into the Casino Gauntlet match at All In. And I'm like, that's a shame. That's a little bit of a shame. That's a crying shame. Shame, 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 shame. I was a little disappointed, mostly because I really wanted MJF to be able to fulfill this situation, to fulfill this prophecy, I guess, where he removed the guy's mask, started wearing it and parading around with it when it was undeserving. It was a cheap shot. And there has to be a payoff to that. And I was thinking to myself, well, if we do it at All In, that'd be terrific. And, it makes sense in Texas as well, geographically speaking. It's a good spot to get some lucha fans in there. So you could probably sell some more tickets just based off of a big time hair versus mask match involving Mystico, right? So I'm like, this is really interesting. But it's clearly not happening because he wants to be in the gauntlet match, and Mark Briscoe's going to be gunning for him, or they'll be gunning for each other now moving forward. And I'm kind of smacking my lips. I'm going, shoot. So I guess the other thing that I theorized is that this match was probably there was a chance that this match could also happen at CMLL's anniversary show later on this year, which makes sense. I guess it makes even more sense that this kind of match would happen in Arena Mexico, which I'm fine with. I just want to see this match. I really want to see if Max would really go through having his head shaved, getting into a match with those types of stakes, knowing, how he's cared for his hair. I think it would have been really, really interesting to see how that was going to go. So I'm not giving up hope on that just yet, but it's a little disappointing. Now, we're not out of the woods yet because the match, Max isn't in the Casino Gauntlet match yet, right? He has to qualify next week. And maybe one of the guys who is going to also be in that qualifier is Mystico, and maybe things happen and neither guy qualify, and we end up with the Apuestas match this way. Maybe it's just a little extra something where that Mystico needed to really turn the screws on MJF, and then we get the match for All In. But I feel like I would have announced, if I were booking, I would have announced it this week to start getting another big boost of sales. That's just me. They want to do it next week, they'll do it next week. But because of the promo that happened after, where Mark Briscoe came out basically taunting MJF and making fun of his penis size, calling it a kosher pickle, which then led to the audience chanting kosher pickle. I don't think we're going to be going that direction with Mystico at all. I think we're going to be adding the idea of a rivalry between MJF and Mark Briscoe for the Casino Gauntlet match at All In, to add a little heat to it, to simmer it up a little bit. And listen, I can't be too disappointed because I'm the guy sitting here every time I have an opportunity to be a militant for Mark Briscoe, and a push for Mark Briscoe, to be a militant for a push for Mark Briscoe, who, as I've mentioned multiple times, has great charisma, works harder than anyone else in every match that he's in. I think this is a guy that the audience would rally behind very, very easily, kind of in an underdog situation. You do the Eddie Kingston push, and it'd work. So, if we're giving Mark Briscoe a little more shine, putting him under a bigger spotlight, I can't complain about that. Like, I can't bitch about that. That to me, that's good. So if he's going to be a little more featured in the Casino Gauntlet environment, well, it's a good step forward, right? It's a very good step forward. I can't complain about it. I'm all for it. So yeah, basically, just talked about the promo where Briscoe comes out and does his thing, and Max is insulted and he's upset, but everyone walks away. MVP says, "This is not business, this is personal, and we conduct business. Let's move on," right? Let's let Mark Briscoe lose his match. But Mark Briscoe did not lose his match because he defeated Roderick Strong, Bandito, and Konosuke Takeshita to qualify for the Casino Gauntlet Battle Royal. Well, it's not a Battle Royal. It's just a Casino Gauntlet match. Yeah. So he's qualified in a very good match. I thought this was the best match of the night. Lots of creative spots in this match as well. I thought Roderick Strong was tremendous. Everyone was very good in here. Bandito seems to have been reinvigorated after this casino, not this casino, excuse me, this Arena Mexico tour that he went on last week. He seems completely re-energized. Terrific stuff. And Briscoe wins with the froggy bow on Roderick Strong to qualify. So good for him. That leads us to the women's four-way to qualify for the number one spot for the Casino Gauntlet match at All In, the women's one. And it is Chris Statlander who defeated Thunder Rosa, Willow Nightingale, and Athena in a super solid match. I thought this was very good. There was some weirdness at some point in the match between Thunder Rosa and Athena. I think they had a severe miscommunication at some point. Something happened. It broke down, but they were able to regain their senses. But you could see like the wheels turning, and there was a spot where Athena lifts Thunder Rosa up into a power bomb position, like from an arm bar into the power bomb position. You know what I'm talking about? And I guess Chris Statlander is supposed to then hit like a heart attack because she's running the ropes, and Athena's turn is like rotating on herself. And Statlander's running the ropes and running them again. And you're just like, no, this is very goofy right now. Something's not. Yeah, there were a couple of iffy spots here where there was clearly some miscommunication, but it ends up with Marina Shafir and Wheeler Yuta getting involved in the match, with Willow actually pouncing on, doing the pounce, I should say, on Wheeler Yuta, kicking him out of the ring. But Statlander lands the Wednesday Night Fever, because we were on a Wednesday, lands it on Willow Nightingale and gets the win, and she qualifies for the number one spot as Marina Shafir gives a knowing, satisfied smile. So I don't know exactly where we're going with this. I don't hate the idea of Chris Statlander with the Death Riders, and would probably re-inject a little interest in here. Then again, I don't know what they're going to do with the Death Riders once Moxley loses the title. So this may be all for nothing, for moot. Could be all for moot, for as far as we know. We get Christian Cage and Nick Wayne backstage, and Christian is not backstage, but in a little pre-tape type of situation, little video, and Christian basically says, very proud of my son. It's time for us to walk side by side now as we become the first father-son tag team champions in AEW. I don't know if you heard the rumor that there's that AEW has prepared like a generational tag team championship where, father and, which would basically be defended and challenged by father and son type of thing. I don't know how real this is. I've seen it from only one place. A lot of reports have been like, we haven't heard about this. And it seems a little strange, other than this being a Christian gimmick, which 100% makes sense. I don't think AEW is officially like entering a new division of parent-child tag team titles. Like, I don't think so. It feels like it's going to be a Christian Cage gimmick if they go that way, which is fine. We got FTR backstage who don't know why the Outrunners suddenly turned against them, so they're going to settle this on Collision they're gonna all get together and try to figure out. They're gonna talk to the Outrunners, and well, we already know how this is gonna go. And then in the main event, Hangman Page defeated the Beast Mortos. Rugged match, nice and physical. I liked it. I thought it was a good, tidy little main event. Nothing to knock your socks off, but both guys worked really well. You know, Mortos did his diving tornillo, which is always tremendous, and Hangman hit a poison rana, does a discus lariat, and then the buckshot lariat for the win. It was fine, but the match itself was mostly a setup for the post-match angle, in which, the lights go out, light comes back on, and the Young Bucks are there holding on to Hangman's arms in the EVP trigger position, and they proceed to deliver an EVP trigger to him, which then draws out the Death Riders, and Mox is handed a chain, to which he proceeds to choke Hangman, choke him out into oblivion. He wraps the chain, big heavy chain around his neck, and literally chokes him out. Well, literally in kayfabe, of course. And then you've got the Ops who come in, try to break through. They can't. There's a numbers game. You've got the Bucks. You've got the rest of the Death Riders. But then Will Ospreay comes out, sort of, and that sends everyone scampering. Now the babyfaces charge the ring and save Hangman from, I don't know, brain damage. I guess. Probably not a good look, because he was selling it like he had been completely choked out. And Mox walks away and promises destruction on July 12th, saying that he's going to show the world what a real world champion looks like. And that's the final. Good, solid angle to wrap it up. To wrap up a good Dynamite overall. Again, nothing that knocked my socks off. Nothing that I'm sitting here bouncing on the chair from excitement. But a good episode. I'm hoping that next week we get some really great momentum building with the Dynamite 300, and there's a lot of big matches that have already been set up. You've got big and interesting, right, from storyline perspectives. You've got Kazuchika Okada and Kota Ibushi. You've got the qualifier for the Casino Gauntlet match that MJF has inserted himself into, and you have Mercedes Moné versus Mina Shirakawa. I'm sure I'm forgetting others, and probably others have been announced by the time that you listen to this. But there's a lot of interesting happening with this show, and I also know that the Collision is going to be very interesting. I saw a couple of spoilers, and for those of you who didn't know, at the end of the show, and we can talk about this. It hasn't been necessarily. It's not part of an angle, and it's not really a spoiler either. It's a post-match occurrence that happened after the match. Once everything was done recording, Max Caster came out to do his greatest wrestler alive gimmick and challenge the locker room as it goes. And it's Bryan Danielson who answered the challenge and came out and basically tapped him out like in 6 seconds or something like that, right? Danielson's getting the itch, folks. Between this and throwing a Busaiku knee in Arena Mexico last week, Danielson's got the itch again. It's going to be it's not a question of if, it's going to be a question of when at this point. I am still maintaining he is going to be in the Casino Gauntlet match at All In for a tremendous surprise. Look, he's popping up much sooner than later. I can almost guarantee it. And here's something else to close this off. Isn't it interesting that they had signed up the Costco guys for All In, and the Costco guys were there at the press conference and was saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to be there. We're going to continue our stuff." And they've done jack shit with the Costco guys so far. I realize the Costco guys have fell off. They're not even remotely as interesting as they were, and I don't see them anywhere. As opposed to, when they were peaking, I don't see jack shit about these guys anymore. Not interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and if you did, leave a like here if you're watching on YouTube, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or 5-star rating on Spotify. Later on this evening, if you were listening to this on Thursday, I will be streaming. Yes, we're going head-to-head with Collision. I fear no man. Otherwise, we'll be back on Wednesday with a brand new Mr. Warren Hayes show podcast and another Dynamite review next week. So thank you again, everyone, for watching. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me, and I'll see you next time.